Molly, can you hear us?
Good evening. Welcome to the Pullman City Council meeting for this Tuesday, March the 23rd. And again, we're virtual, but it's getting closer. I think we're going to have a live council meeting in the council chambers coming up probably the next time on April 13th. We're still working our way through it, but it's getting better. And that's always encouraging as we all started phase 3 as of yesterday. So Dee, would you please call roll of the council?
Mayor Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Chapman. Councilmember McCall.
Here.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Records. Councilmember Sorensen.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
Brandon Chapman notified us that he could not be here tonight. Do I hear a motion to excuse him?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we go to announcements tonight. As I just mentioned, we started phase 3, so we're along the way now. It's a big boost to our local businesses, and let's remain vigilant, though, and do our best to protect ourselves and others as we remain in this phase and continue moving forward. As the cases of Whitman County have risen the past 2 days and 2 weeks, rather, let's remember to protect ourselves while supporting the entire community, because we definitely want to stay in phase 3 and move towards phase 4, and we do not want to go backwards. And at least today's report had a few less people on that list. Pullman Parks and Recreation virtual egg hunt registration is open. You can register for a free activity bag pickup time, and the 200 activity bags will be available for drive-through pickup on Friday, April 2nd from 4 to 6 p.m. and Saturday, April 3rd from 9 to 11. There is a 1 bag per family limit, so get registered early. And the bags are activities, crafts, prizes to enjoy with your entire family. And again, just go to our website, look at Parks and Recreation, and you'll find the registration point. Spring is here. That means that spring cleaning is too, so be on the lookout for the city street sweepers. And check us out on our city website. You can find their scheduled residential cleaning area. And please, if you can, sweep off those sidewalks from the gravel. Get them back on the street so our street sweepers can take care of that. Pullman City Council has identified the retaining wall on the corner of Spring Street and Main Street as a possible location for the upcoming public art mural. Special virtual town hall meeting will take place tomorrow night. Again, we want to thank the subcommittee of Eileen McCall, Pat Wright, and Dan Records for meeting that and doing the town hall. I'm going to turn it over now to Dan, who can talk a little bit more of the town hall for tomorrow night. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. As the mayor said, the subcommittee will be meeting tomorrow night at 6 p.m. To receive public feedback on the mural project. At this point, I know that we've received at least 14 individuals that have signed up to give public comment. Those interested in participating and providing public comment at the meeting tomorrow night should contact the city by 5 o'clock tomorrow on Wednesday to express their interest and get the information to call into that meeting. The ground rules for that meeting will be gone. I will go over the ground rules for that meeting and the public feedback at the beginning of the meeting. But we are anticipating that individuals will have 3 minutes to provide public feedback. But if we receive a large number of people interested in providing comments, we may have to adjust the timing of that or make other adjustments so that we can get through that meeting. I would also like to say something about the events that happened last week in Atlanta that I think, as we're talking about this mural project, I think it's important to note the events that are going on as we talk about racism and its impact on our community here in Pullman, to recognize that on March 17th, we saw another mass shooting event in Georgia in which a man shot and killed 8 people, including 6 women of Asian descent. And over the past year, we have seen a trend of increased violence and hate directed at members of the Asian and Pacific Islander communities in our country. And Pullman is not entirely immune from this. And I encourage everyone to stand with and show their support for those members of our community that may feel the great impact of this event. And also, I know that a local group is planning to meet on Sunday to show solidarity and support for the Asian Pacific Islander communities of the Palouse. And I'm also, very disheartened and saddened to say that while I was preparing comments to speak about this at tonight's meeting, yesterday there was another mass shooting event that happened in Colorado, in which a man shot and killed 10 people, including a police officer. And as the story is still unfolding, I'm not going to speculate on the details of the motive of this murder, but I hope that people here in Pullman can show support for those that are directly impacted by these events, and work to ensure that that we can have conversations in Pullman and we can look out for each other, and ensure that Pullman is a community where this type of thing is not going to happen. That we, as neighbors, as members of a community, that we can talk with each other, we can share disagreements, but that ultimately we all share a common set of values and wanting to see Pullman be a thriving and successful community and working together. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor Johnson.
Thank you, Dan. Those are great comments. And again, I'd like to remind people that there will be a rally on Sunday at 2 o'clock at Rainey Park, put on by the Asians and Asian Pacific group. And that, again, is 2 o'clock Sunday at Rainey Park. They originally were going to be at Cougar Plaza, but the group has gone so big now that they've decided to do it at Rainey Park. And I know that I will be there, and Gary Jenkins, our police chief, will be there as well. With that, we now move to item number C, which is our confirmation of appointment. As you well know, we moved up Mike Urban from our Director of Finance and Administration to the City Administrator, and that left an opening. And we were so fortunate, and we had some really good candidates. We had a couple of council members on that selection panel, Dan Records and Parks. And we selected and appointed Jonna Davis, who some of you might recall, because Jonna is also with the State Auditor's Office. And she has been here and she's worked with our finance team before. She's got some great background. She's been Assistant State Auditor since 2016. She was a Fiscal Specialist Supervisor at Ellensburg at Central Washington University before that. She's been in the private sector. She lives locally, and we are very, very fortunate that she applied and also that she accepted the position. So I know Mike was very pleased too, because she will be starting with, again, with council confirmation tonight, starting on April 21st to relieve Mike of some of the pressures that he's had doing two jobs. But she'll also be following the excellent work. One of the things that we pointed out in the interview, that Mike has done a great job in reporting to the council and giving us some good budget numbers and figures and presentations that we can all understand. We've all been very appreciative of that. And she said that she would certainly continue that. So I have appointed her of the confirmation of the council. So at this point, I'd like to hear a motion to confirm that appointment, if there's any more discussion on that.
I move to confirm the appointment of Jonna Davis to Finance Director.
Second.
Moved and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? And now Mike can.
Mayor.
Hope and help as well. With that, we now go to item. Yes, Dan, did you have your
I'd
hand
like
up?
to just make a correction. I said that the sign up for the public meeting tomorrow cutoff time was 5 p.m. It's actually 4 p.m. is the cutoff time. So if people want to sign up, they need to sign up by 4 o'clock p.m. on Wednesday.
Okay, very good. So item number D tonight is the presentation. Involves the library, the Sherrod Family Memorial Fund, the Thomas C. and Winifred Neal Library donations. And with that, we go to our library director, Joanna Bailey.
Well, good evening, Council. Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased tonight to present you with two opportunities to accept revenue to support Neal Public Library from funds managed by the Novia Foundation in Spokane. Neal Public Library's Heritage Edition was funded by a generous donation from the Sherrod Family Memorial Fund. Each year, the library requests funding to pay for janitorial services in the edition. For 2021, the cost is $22,133. The granting process for the Sherrod Fund requires the Council to authorize the expenditure of money from the fund as outlined in the library's proposal contained in your meeting packet. The library is also the beneficiary of the Thomas C. and Winifred Neal Endowment Fund, as Mayor Johnson said. Staff is pleased to present a donation in the amount of $16,000 to celebrate the Neal family's support for Neal Public Library's materials collections. Novia Foundation manages both of the aforementioned funds. So at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Molly Sanchez to you all tonight. Molly is the Director of Grants and Community Engagement at Novia Foundation. We've partnered together for many years to support Neal Public Library, and I'm really grateful that she has agreed to share some brief remarks about Novia Foundation and its critical role as a conduit between local donors and their desire to make a difference in Pullman. So with that, Molly, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I'm juggling video and phone on two different devices. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here on behalf of the Novia Foundation tonight. For those who aren't familiar with the Novia, we are a community foundation that serves 20 counties, 10 in Eastern Washington and 10 in North Idaho. Our commitment to this region is to join with local partners throughout communities to grow and sustain vibrant societies where every individual has an opportunity to thrive. We've been in existence for nearly 50 years, partnering with generous donors like Ivan Sherrod, like Thomas and Winifred Neal, and many others who have established funds to support a broad range of community programs in this region and beyond. So with those funds, we annually award about $8 million in grants for everything from arts and culture programs, health and well-being, economic opportunity, education and youth development, scholarships, and library services. Ivan Sherrod and Winifred Neal and Thomas Neal are just two of the funds that we have at Novia that are specifically benefiting Pullman and Palouse region. All told, those funds, along with others at the foundation, have collectively generated more than $2.2 million for the Whitman County over the past 10 years. We know we can't do this work alone to support communities, and we really need to be engaged with local community partners like Joanna, who's just been a great partner in all this work over the years. And we convene local leadership councils to solicit local community input. And I just want to do a shout out to Mayor Johnson and Pat Wright for participating on leadership councils and really helping us understand how to flow dollars into communities where they're going to do the best good and most good. So we're just grateful for that partnership. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and for the great work in the community. To be a partner with you, it's a privilege, and to be able to carry out the legacies of donors like Ivan Sherrod and Winifred and Thomas Neal for the betterment of the community. So thank you again, and look forward to being in your region in person sometime really soon.
And Molly, we are grateful for all the work that Novia has done throughout during this COVID crisis. There's been a lot of money that's been funneled into Whitman County and Northern Idaho. You helped out with Pine City and Malden with the fire there. And so I think a lot of us that have seen what Novia has been able to do, we're very grateful for all the participation. So thank you again for that.
Thank you. We love being a partner in the community.
Okay, Joanna?
Yes, thank you, Molly. Thank you. I appreciate you joining us tonight. So with that, it's staff's recommendation that council motion to accept funding from the Sherrod Family Memorial Fund in the amount of $22,133 and from the Thomas C. and Winifred Neal Endowment Fund in the amount of $16,000.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Again, thank you. And thank you, Molly. And thank you, Joanna.
Thank you.
And now back by popular demand. I thought it just started out that way since he didn't get a chance to quite do it the last time. Here is Mike Urban with the financial update.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. Before I dive into the financial update, just a quick note. Thank you for approving the my replacement in Finance and Administrative Services. We're really excited to get Jonna on board. Her talent is exceptional, and she's going to be a great part of the team here. So I'm going to begin sharing my screen. And can everybody see my presentation? Excellent. Unfortunately, I can only see a couple of you at a time. As usual, I will pause at the end of each slide and ask if anybody has any questions to please speak up so I can make sure I get all those. I'm going to do the no look meeting as well because my monitor where I have everything is up here. So I will glance over and do that. And just a last word of reminder, especially to our folks watching at home, when you're looking at the graphs, just remember to look at the actual numbers compared to where the graph is, because what might look like a steep drop is really relative to the scale of the graph that Microsoft has created for us. A little mea culpa on this first slide. I did make one change, and this is the entire change to the entire show. I updated the date at the bottom because it was originally March 9th, and that's what shows in your packet as well. So if we're ready, I will move on to the first part of this. We'll go through the revenues and then the expenses and a couple thoughts at the end. So, here we go. So we start with our general fund revenue, and for the sake of this presentation, I always back out any of the airport items, whether it's the pass-through revenues or that. So what we're looking at is an apples to apples comparison of City of Pullman specific operations. So as you can see, the 2020 revenue budget was $23,349,000. We came in just slightly higher at $23,929,000. There's certainly some reasons for that. In spite of COVID, we used some reserves to help balance the budget at the beginning, but we also got that nice little bump of CARES Act dollars at $1.6 million. So that certainly helped some of the shortfall on reduced revenue from admissions tax and some sales tax items we'll get to on the next slide. But a couple of the items that we track as a city and that's really important to council on that last bullet item, we wanted to point to you that yes, our liquor items were up 77,000 for about an 18%. And our marijuana, and I looked at this twice, was pretty even. We were down $439 less than 1% versus a previous year collection at that time, which all makes up the general fund. We'll break into some of the more specific general fund items as I go through some more slides. Are there any questions on this one? Okay. So sales tax, and this is one of those items that I report on monthly to council as we receive it, because it is our most volatile source of revenue, especially as we saw over the last couple months and even into early COVID. The original revenue budget was $5 million. We came in over that by $479,000, but you could see the collection from one-time construction sales tax was up 82% over the prior year. So even just backing that off and saying we had a normal year, comparatively, that number would have been down below the 5 million, closer to 4.8. And then if you really add the retail part, because I separate that out, what's one-time construction, and then the rest we just consider retail, that was down about 6% overall for the year. Not a great number. We certainly want to keep shopping local and supporting our family businesses. But when COVID first struck, that number was twice what we thought it would. We thought it was going to be over 12%, maybe as high as 15. So at the end of the day, 6.1%, considering you lost mom's weekend, graduation, the entire football schedule. I don't think it's a small victory, because I know there's a lot of family businesses out there struggling. But as far as the city goes, we expected worse, we prepared for worse, and it came in just a little bit better than we were planning for. So there was a lot of work done by a lot of department heads to make sure that we can keep the city afloat during this deal, worried about sales tax. Question?
Mike, I have a
Yes.
question, Suzanne. It says there are 6 home football games in 2019, but do you mean, should that be 2020? Are you talking about just this very past season, or?
We had 6 home games in 2019, and in 2020 we had 0.
Oh,
essentially.
I see what you're saying.
Because people weren't coming to town to fill the hotels, to spend money at the restaurants, grocery stores, and those things. So yeah, it's a comparative of 6 to 0, and in 2021 there's, I believe, 7 on the home schedule, and depending on capacity, how we can work on that. When we did the budget for 2021, we assumed a 50% stadium capacity.
Okay, thank you. I was reading that wrong, so thanks for that clarification.
Sure. No, good question. Okay. Any more on this before I? All right. Property tax revenue, another, real big chunk of our general fund. This is our pretty stable revenue. We're always going to collect on the property taxes. County treasurer works really hard on making sure everybody gets the opportunity to pay. And even during the COVID, Chris set up a payment plan for some folks that we had some local people take advantage of. So even if it takes a while, we will always collect on the property tax, whether the house sells or if a certain amount of time goes by and it goes into a foreclosure process. So we may not get it all in 1 year, but we will get it all eventually. So our collection rate versus the budget, and it's a little different than the collection rate versus the actual. So when the budget was done before I arrived, our property tax was estimated based on increasing values in new construction. So that's one rate. What we can actually collect, what new construction came in at, plus the 1%, is the actual rate. So really, that second bullet point's just informational on the budget. Reality is the third bullet point. So our collection rate was very well. 100, we're 98% collection rate, and during COVID, that's an excellent number. During the recession in 2008, 2009, that number was lower. So this is a critical operation, so we can continue to fund our general fund items, police, fire, library, recreation, administration, parks. And also this is our mechanism for getting the those bond 1 and bond 2 items paid. So collecting the property tax on those so we can pay our debts to the bank. Any questions on this? Okay. Utilities revenue, just a tick under the budget, and a lot of that can be attributed to the fact there wasn't a lot of students in town that we normally would expect, and some lag in collecting some of the utility taxes because of the governor's moratorium on collecting. I've been sending you normal updates every month on that as well, but we're well within the margins on this. Natural gas was certainly down by quite a bit, but when you have a lot of large buildings up on campus closed for part of the year, that's not terribly unexpected. Electricity, on the other hand, in a lot of our homes was up. And telephone continues to trend down, and that's just a normal thing as people keep turning off landlines. We're just collecting less, and in fact, we are down 38% on telephone collections since 2016. So people are getting rid of their landlines, and that's just a revenue source that goes along with it. Any questions on utility revenues? Okay. Building permit revenue. This is a really great indicator for construction in the future months, because as they get the permit, they start getting stuff delivered to sites. We can get the destination sales tax on it, and off they go building and creating more properties where we can continue to spread our pie around and keep our property taxes a little more even. Unfortunately, you can see that 2020, that number was down significantly over prior years. We are seeing an uptick in 2021. There's a lot of pent-up demand. Folks downstairs in planning and in inspections are very, very busy. But, when you're shut down basically for most of the spring because nobody could go on site to do a lot of work, it kind of put projects off, and people put some things on hold while they were waiting to see how we would come out of the pandemic. So it is a lower number than we would have liked to have seen, but looking at what 2021 is starting to shape up like, we're hoping to see a significant rebound on that. And this is the last slide that covers that general fund item. So are there any questions before we get into some of the special funds? Okay. So our first one, streets and arterial street revenue, you can see is very similar to the previous years. Items that work into this, real estate excise tax was down about $100,000, 27.9%. A little bleed over from the previous slide, like when people couldn't be doing construction, they were also not allowed to show houses for a significant period of time. So that low supply led a lot to real estate excise tax being down. And the other piece on that too is fuel tax. With distancing and things being closed, I certainly traveled a lot less than I normally would. So the fuel tax was down in proportionate as well. And fuel tax has a movement with the fuel rates. So cost of gas was down as well. So that all kind of plays into itself there. Any question on this one? Okay. So specifically to the utility fund revenues, we talked a little bit about it on a couple slides before, but this is the revenues specifically going into the utility funds, the moratorium on the shutoffs and the no collection of interest and fees. There's a large chunk, you see how it spiked up there in 2019. There was a large transfer in a prior year for projects moving from one piece to the next. So it's a flow issue. A note on that second bullet point on the moratoriums, with the governor's latest proclamation last week that moved us up to phase 3, there was also some changes. Disconnects now are prohibited until the end of the state of emergency or July 31st, whichever comes first. And then that'll be reassessed. And the ability to charge fees and interest, that was set to expire in October. It has now been rolled over to January of 2022. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that. But something the council was ahead of the governor on was go ahead and, waiving those fees and interests and stopping the shutoffs. So that's something that we've done here in Pullman ahead of the state, because we wanted people to keep washing their hands.
And Mike, this might be a point too, where we could talk about the Community Action Center, because there is money for utility help and relief. So if people are having problems paying their utility bills, there has been grant money that's been given to the Community Action Center that can help you with your utility bills.
Yes, and you will need to contact the Community Action Center directly. We are working on a direct mailer out of the utility department right now, as well as doing a addendum into our regular utility bills going forward. So there's some money right now sitting there, and there's also another influx of money that might be available to community action through the American Rescue Plan. So we will continue to monitor and promote that as well to our community if they're in need and they can qualify. This is a way to get some of their utilities paid for. Thank you, Mayor. Okay. Any other questions on this one? Excellent. Transit revenue, very similar to the prior year, but the FTA did have some stabilizing grant funds that came through to us through the CARES Act. It was certainly had more ability to use for different things than the CARES Act that came through the general fund. But we had some refunds that went back to our two biggest users, the school district and WSU, and we've had council items on those in the past. But by with the FTA stabilization, transit has remained very similar to the prior years. We picked up a couple buses, so when we're doing this distancing, we can run bus after bus and maintain those items. We got a few electric buses coming, and now I just realized I'm stealing a lot of Wayne's thunder for later, so I'm going to leave some of that on the table. Are there any questions on the transit revenue? Okay. One of the other funds that council keeps a very close eye on, as well as the Civic Improvement Fund. This is where the lodging tax rolls through, and as you can see, as you would expect with no travel, no 4th of July, Lentil Festival, football games, this number is down quite significantly. We're starting to see some turnaround on that with phase 3, and hopefully we can get close to what we did last year. It's already almost the end of the first quarter, and we're still not seeing things reopening in such a way where people are coming to town. Not that they should be traveling much, but if they're here for work and need a place to stay, there's those items. But so the Civic Improvement Fund did see a significant change on that. Any questions?
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Just for my own information in regards to the 4th of July and Lentil Festival stuff there, do we bring in much in regards to hotel motel tax on those weekends? I'm just curious if it's a significant number. Or
I think anecdotally I can tell you this without getting into the asking the hoteliers to provide their specifics on those dates. I can look at it as a month. I can tell you the 4th of July certainly was busy in 2019 because Palouse Summer Series was running over the same time. We had some friends from out of town that came and stayed at the hotel, stopped with us. I'm not bitter, but at least we got the revenue from that. But yeah, so I would say 4th of July, there was enough things that were going along with the 4th of July that helped that made that look good. Lentil Fest, I can look at the entire month, but that's August. There was one home football game. So how that skews, I can't look at it by the date. I can only see it by the other, but I can reach out to the hoteliers and see if I can get some better data for you on that and follow this up with a memo.
thank you.
You got it. Good one. Okay. Any other questions on this one? All right. I think at this point we go from money in to money out. So, yep, we start with the general fund expenditures. And again, this is administration, police, fire, parks, recreation, library. planning, economic development, building inspections, all those items that don't have a specific generator that goes along with those, like the utilities. So the budget for expenses was $24,869,000. We went right into keeping everybody safe and keeping everybody healthy mode, and reduced programs so we weren't gathering. So yeah, expenditures were down in 2020 in spite of the fact we spent $1.6 million of CARES money responding to the pandemic. So purchasing PPE, getting everybody ready to work remotely, those types of items. So, you know, if you take that number down below the budget a little bit too, it's certainly below the previous year. CARES Act really helped us get through some of the basic stuff. Our cases generally in the county have been fairly low, and our case throughout the city staff has been fairly low as well. So being able to respond to that as an organization, a lot of kudos to our staff and the department managers to keep that going. So that was the expenditure and the CARES. And then the other piece that made 2020 seem like a little bit of bump is council approved some CIP dollars to help fund the new city hall construction. And we're looking towards a reopening plan here. We're certainly looking at getting council meetings back face to face as well. So any questions on the general fund in its totality? Okay, let's get into the groupings then. We start with the legislative expenses. This is council items. And what you'll see, and this is the most significant piece of this, is the expenditures are up mostly because that $474,000 that council took and said, we're going to do small business support. We're going to help Pullman Regional Health with testing. And that's CARES dollars, so that's dollar for dollar. We got it in from the feds, and we pushed it into the community to help things go along with the help of Regional Hospital in Suida. So really, you pull that number out, and everything's very similar to the way it was before. Any questions on legislative? Okay. Finance and administration, that number certainly ticked up quite a bit. The CIP expenditures that I mentioned earlier for new city hall lives in this world. So 550,000 of that. And the liability insurance increase that we've been experiencing, if you back those two items off, we're very similar to the previous year while adding an additional accountant up in the finance department. We're still significantly under budget though in this grouping: HR, legal, finance, executive, clerk. Any questions on this, Al?
Just if you could clarify for me, you say the liability insurance increases to six. Is that an increase of 64,000, or is that the total premium?
No, that was an increase of $64,000. That was not previously anticipated. It was budgeted during a budget amendment that I brought back. It's the cost of our insurance it's based on our exposure as well as our worker hours. So an increase in workers and an increase in worker hours. This is why I follow overtime so carefully, because that does affect our insurance rates, and just the liability part of it as well.
Thank you.
You got it. Okay. Law enforcement update. Oh, yep, there it is. I got my little reminder. So their budget of $8.4 million, Gary jumped right into action along with his management staff and held the line on expenses where he felt he could, and they came in at 7.3 million. So a million under their budget, and to the point where they even cut their overtime expenses by 174,000. That's 54% of what they had budgeted. So yeah, they ratcheted up and continued to serve the city, kept themselves healthy, and I do have a quick hiring update too, because this is something that council had mentioned during the budget process. We had a lateral position start on the 25th of January, and another one started actually last week on Monday. So right now, those two replacements took care of the existing budget, the two positions where we had budgeted and people had left. So Gary's exhausted the lateral list. He's now looking at entry level. They're doing some background checks right now and working on that process. And as you know, with the background checks and hiring a not a lateral but a BLEA officer, it just goes a little bit slower because it's more exhaustive. And then once we get them on board, we got to send them off to the academy. So they're doing their due diligence, but they do have their foot on the gas and trying to bring the staff up to what the council had discussed during the budget process. But could be another couple months, but we will certainly keep the council posted. Any questions?
Mike,
Yeah.
so the about $1 million, was some of that a savings then in labor costs because we didn't have the positions filled?
Some was labor. Some was it was across the board equipment. Anything that they felt that they needed and it was emergent, we certainly looked at those purchases. Anything that could be postponed until we had a better idea of where the budget is, I was fine. But I would want to go back and look at the percentages, and I can break the costs down by what was salary, what was, overtime was 175,000 of that million because he saved over 54%. So.
But there was nothing there that dealt with certification. Anything that had to do with officer certification, that was given full blessings. They could go ahead and do all that.
Yeah.
I just wondered because we had okayed a bunch of officers to be hired, and I know we didn't. So I just was trying to figure out if that was some of the major savings here. So.
It was. I don't even want to spitball the number because I think I'd be wrong one way or the other.
And then we had one officer that left for Spokane Valley or Spokane, I believe, too.
That position has been backfilled with the hire on the 15th of last week. So right now we are at the amount of officers that are budgeted for 2021. We're still trying to get the officers that we're never able to get from the 2019 and 2020 biennium budget. And as we have those officers in the pipeline and we're ready to make a hire, we will come in front of council, ask for the budget amendment and make those hires.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything on law enforcement? Okay. Let's move on to, I turned the page too fast. Fire and ambulance. So the budget for 2020 for fire and ambulance was 7.4 million roughly. They came in at 7.1. They too looked at their expenses and were able to cut their overtime down by 21%. So that saved 102,000 there. Increases that, we didn't see the same savings from department to department. And you can see how it increased from 18 to 19 to 20. Those are really attributed to wages and benefits because the city hired 2 additional firefighters in 19, and then we did the same in 2020. So the costs on those rose, and we were able to get those candidates in through the academies and trained in their working shifts. So any question on fire? Okay. In the past, this budget item was separated into 2 funds, fire and ambulance, and something I worked with the chief is now it's all in one bars area. So you'll start to see it as fire instead of fire and ambulance. You'll start to see it as fire going forward. Okay. Community and economic development. This is the planning department, economic development department, and then the building inspections department. And as you can see, it is up over the previous year, mostly due to the addition of filling an empty position from 2019. I think Rick actually started the first day of the COVID experience. So I probably want to double check with him, but he was on essentially the entire year. So there was his items that came along. Also in 2019, we really didn't have an economic development department until the fourth quarter. So those really are the changes you see going from 19 to 20. Everything else, the budgets were held very close and in line. So good management on those parts. Bringing RJ in August while Pete retired in June. So there was a little bit of savings there on salary and during that overlap period. So any questions on economic or community and economic development? Okay. Library, yeah, there was a difference. 1.9 million was the budget. 1.2 was the expenditures. When COVID happened, we shut it down. And guidance on the library seemed to lag other items through the state. So we were always waiting for the guidance from the state before we looked at redoing anything. And it was just recently that the library was able to slowly reopen and start serving patrons in person. So you see there was some savings there from not filling positions. They certainly cut back on their inventory of books and other materials that they purchased. And it's really, this is all due to pandemic conditions, in spite of the fact that we did finish the roof repairs in the third quarter of 2020. So that was an additional $140,000 that was up, that normally wouldn't have been there because it was a once every 20 years or so roof repair. So any questions on library? Ann?
Yes, thank you. I just want to say that I'm on the library board, so I hear Joanne's reports every month, and all the departments have done so well in controlling their expenses, but the library in particular really made some tough cuts, but at the same time they were still able to do curbside service to the patrons, or start that when it was allowable. And just knowing what I know from on the inside and how hard they've worked, again, just like all of our departments, but it really is a testament to the library for being public facing and continuing to do that. And I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely. Joanne and I had some very, very difficult conversations. And as we begin to reopen, and things that we worked on in the meantime, getting IT's help and, moving computers around so we could have computer access. I think we're up to 4 stations now where people can distance, and then moving things around with the buildings department to make sure that when staff returned to work, they were still able to distance and do their work safely. It was more than just we're closed and we'll keep doing curbside, and they've done an excellent job at that. It was also, what does reopening look like and how do we get ready for it? So there was a lot of foresight on that part. Okay.
Yeah, with like you said, very little guidance. A lot of the other departments had clear directions on what they could do and couldn't do, but the library was just waiting. And meanwhile, their patrons were very impatient.
Yeah, I would say the only guidance that, I've been really focused on city activities and casual interest in some other things like sports, of course. That's just me. But I think the only thing that was slower guidance coming out of the state than the library is senior services. And there's just nothing on that even now. It's, they were the first to close down because of the fact that they're our most vulnerable population. So we just assume they're going to be the last to come back. But now that we're looking at phase 3, we're starting to ask the questions: is what does that look like? Give us some indication so we can start making those plans ahead of reopening the senior center. Okay. All right. Any other questions on the library? All right. Oh, speaking of things that would fall into the senior center, we have Parks and Recreation here. Again, very similar to the previous graph, curtailed expenses due to the pandemic. Things like Rainy Pool not being open because we didn't know, that's the summer season and we didn't know what the exposure was over there, but want to make sure our community knows that we are working ahead on getting that open in 2021, doing it responsibly, doing it safe. In the meantime, we continue to look at programs in the aquatic center and as well as recreation in and of itself. The spring sports started yesterday. So we could see there's a huge pent up demand for services, and rec has been, I've talked to Kurt Damon several times about what his contemporaries are doing across the state, and we're definitely in the upper half, if not upper quarter, on bringing these items back to our community in a safe way, albeit staggered. We would love to be able to do more, but we want to make sure the community continues to roll through the phases to completion. We do not want to see a step backwards. So a lot of what you're seeing here is just less activities because we were restricted by the state. So any question on Parks and Rec? Okay. We are getting there. That was the last of the general fund. So now we're into the streets and arterial street expenses, the first of the other items. So really, when you look at the expenses here, we're certainly down because we were doing less projects. But the biggest project that we didn't do was that resurfacing, and we've talked about it several times as the council. There was the anomaly with the bid, and we had to bring back the 2020 resurfacing project for 2021, which that was just approved by council, and they're going to move along on that. And then just the timing of finishing some other projects goes along with that. So that's why the expense budget is down significantly. It's just really just timing up projects. Staff continues to do their portion of plowing and all those other items there. And we did not really see a decrease in regular operations, just the items that we could do, whether it was didn't have the ability to get materials or the timing of permits or so forth. Any questions on streets or arterial? Okay. Utility expenses. There was that significant capital projects expenditure in 2019, so that's why you see the big wave. But if you look at 2020 compared back to 16, 17, it's right in par. One of the things that we did complete in 2020 is the solar project on the recreation building next door. We continue to see savings on that on days where they're not covered with snow. It is kind of interesting to watch the snow covered days and how it goes down to about 0. I thought it would melt off quicker, and it doesn't. But the utilities, we did hold off on some, or tapered back on some summer hires just to make sure that our reserves stayed to where they need to, but very, very similar utility operations than it was in the past. Any questions on this one? Okay. I got 2 more before the questions page then. That's transit. Again, we did some extra expenditures in transit that we wouldn't normally do in a reaction to COVID. plexiglass, a lot of PPE, a lot of sanitizing, but that was backfilled by the grant. So even though those things happened, our expenses were less because when we don't have we're not running WSU's contract as much, we're not running the school districts, there's certainly less need for staff. So that's a curtailed operation as well, a lot like you saw with the library and Parks and Recreation.
Mike,
Yes.
do you anticipate that those contracts with WSU and the school district will resume this coming school year? Or do we know yet?
As we start to do back to school operations, as we saw the Pullman School District is rolling their folks back in for some in-person, and as we look to WSU for what fall 2021 is going to look like, I'm very optimistic that we're going to see increased student, I guess they're both students. So increased student ridership. Will social distancing, 6 feet, and those items be in effect? Will that create, the trailing, the bus trails that we have that I'm sure some of you have seen around town where the one's following the other? Yeah, but I also just read in the CDC guidelines that schools can now go from 6 feet down to 3 feet between students. I don't know what this means yet for buses, and we're going to wait for some guidance on that locally as well, and an expanded CDC. So am I optimistic that the schools will be back in session? Yes, absolutely. It's good for our kids as long as we can keep our community healthy.
Thank you.
Any other questions on transit? Okay. Then our last expense fund before we get into my final thoughts is this is our internal services funds. IT, buildings, ERD live in here, and their revenue basically comes from charging the other funds for their services. So it's a dollar in, dollar out type of thing. So the increase you see from 2020 versus 2019, a lot of that had to do with the new city hall construction, as we asked buildings to pay for their footprint out of some of their reserves, and same with IT. ERD purchases were down a little bit over the prior years, as we were very methodical about how we replace equipment, and the cost value of replacing it now versus running it just a little bit longer with unanticipated where our revenues were going to be. But we're starting to see some equipment get to a point where, yeah, it absolutely needs to be replaced. There's a couple items coming back to you on the agenda on the 13th of April for bid acceptance. So you'll start to see those a little bit as well. But again, very similar to prior years, except for 2018, where we had a very large expenditure for buying a building that went through the building fund. So,
are we at the point yet, Mike, where we can tell how much of our time and how much of the cost we have in buildings as far as the old city hall, since we're just maintaining it right now for district court? Are we going to be able to isolate those numbers here pretty soon?
we will. We were absolutely still in the old building at this time.
Right.
This building is still not fully operational in that people aren't coming in and out, opening and closing the doors all day long, which would certainly have a effect on our heating and cooling. But yeah, I think running a comparison is certainly something we can be looking at mid-second quarter. Okay. Any other questions on internal service funds? All right, we'll go to my last slide then. So, final thoughts. Let's start with the 2021 sales tax collections. As I mentioned earlier, and as council is more than aware, this is something I keep everybody up to date on regularly. January and February's numbers were a little concerning, but in the totality of it, if you think about, January which is really November because we collect, those 2 months farther back. We went through the shopping season. We're going to see the actual January numbers come in next week. And January of 2020 was different than 2021 because in January of 2020, we were still pre-COVID. We were still open. Students were here. We were still doing a lot of things. Same with February. It wasn't until March that happened. So I'm looking at these next two sales tax numbers very closely and continuing to hope that phase 3 turns into phase 4, and hopefully there's no more phases. We're just done after that, where we can get back to reopening and resuming operations, for the sake of our local businesses and the community as a whole. But yeah, the first 2 numbers out of the first 2 months were a little soft, but a lot of it was attributable to construction, changing that one-time construction. We had a really large pop in sales tax on that one-time construction in 2020. Again, more than double of usual. So I'll continue to keep everybody posted on that. The next item, the unanticipated sales tax refund. We did hear from a taxpayer who had paid some sales tax that they're entitled to have back. I know that's been covered in the media, but we continue to work on finding ways to fill that potential shortfall with items that, savings and salaries for unfilled positions as we continue to try to hire people. We just brought on a new finance director who starts in April. And, that's the whole first quarter savings for that position that we can apply towards that. I don't want to have any of our programs. I really hate the idea of having to lay people off to fulfill this obligation. So we're just looking for the least amount of pain possible so our community doesn't feel it and our staff doesn't feel it, but we can still meet what we owe back to the state. So far, they've still only come back to us with $124,939.50 that they want those dollars, and Department of Revenue has been fantastic to work with. They're allowing us to pay that in 5 equal monthly installments. The second installment will be going out this week. So that helps with the cash flow and helps with the lessen the blow. We're just waiting for that other shoe to drop when it comes to the unanticipated sales tax refund. I've been working on a spreadsheet offline and talking to some department heads about how their first quarter is ending and what they're looking for as the second quarter goes along. And I think I've identified enough offsets that instead of trying to come up with that $600,000 number that we've been talking about the whole time, I think I've got that number down closer to 80,000. And I continue to work on that with the individual departments as to what type of things can come up as we wait for revenues to come in, as well as items for the American Rescue Plan, which is an excellent transition to that one right there. So before, when I was ready for this 2 weeks ago, it hadn't been passed. It has been passed now. To the state of Washington, it's $1.1 billion. Our portion, as we can best estimate right now, is going to be north of $7 million. What does that mean? We are still trying to get to the nitty-gritty on the answers. When we did the CARES Act, there was a lot of paperwork I put in packets, and I'm kind of looking for that same direction from our alphabet agencies, whether it's Commerce or the AWC, where they've really dug into this and say, here's what this means. We've looked at the legislation, and it's a heavy lift to get through, but we're starting to see things slowly trickle in. Funds could be used for responding to the pandemic. So what does responding mean? We're going to find out. covering costs incurred from the public health emergency. Again, very vague, but we want to get into that specifics. So when I come back to council later with a contract saying I'm recommending that we take these grant dollars, I can also bring you back a menu, a lot like we did last time. And, paying attention to what council set up in their goal setting and priorities from the 6th. Those are very much on my mind to bring in for support. Replacing lost, decreased, or delayed city revenues caused by the pandemic. That is where I'm really going to get into whoever the granting agency is and try to come up with some really strong definitions, because if you look at our sales tax numbers, they were a little stronger because of the one-time construction. But if you pull that out, our sales tax was for retail was certainly down. So can I make that designation? How deep can I go on that? Because I want to squeeze every dollar I can out of this. Admissions tax, absolutely. That's an easy one to prove. Movie theater hasn't been able to run the way it needs to be operating and profitable business. Certainly not having football and basketball games with attendees. Those types of items, that's a direct correlation, and we can draw that line. Addressing the negative economic impact to local businesses and nonprofits. It looks like we're going to have some ability to do some more help of our small businesses like we did with the CARES Act dollars. And then making investments in infrastructure. So again, very, very vague. We need to get into specifics. There will be a contract coming for us to sign, and it should be in the next 30 to 60 days. And while that's happening, I'm going to get those frequently asked questions, and I'm going to start as I get them. I'm going to just start peppering you with them so we can start thinking about how we want to do this. One of the things that I have learned is it looks like it's going to come in 2 tranches. First half, 90 to 120 days after we sign the contract, and the second half in 2022. So we have some time to do some planning. I believe we have to have it spent by the end of 2024. My big question right now is, when did the period start? Did it start at the beginning of the COVID pandemic in March? Because that certainly opens up some items that we may have spent money on in 2020 that are eligible. Or did it start January 1st when CARES ended? Or did it start when the legislation was signed in March? So we're still learning more about this, and information is going to be forthcoming. Rising costs of partner groups. I mentioned before, whether it's, elections. We're working on a district court extension I hope to bring to you in April, so we can continue having that operate out of the old City Hall. Humane Society, Whitcom, we're seeing our partner agencies charging us more, and our revenues are not quite going along with that. So figuring out different ways to work with these groups and maintain our reserves as well, while we don't build the reserves for other folks, and coming up with the best solutions for our community. But I do see every one of our partner groups, even during the pandemic, raising rates. And the last item of significance is all of our bargaining unit contracts do expire at the end of the year. So we're going to need to start working with folks earlier than usual to try to get all these things buttoned up. I'm not a big fan of coming back in the previous year doing retro, but if that's what we need to do to make sure we get something fair and equitable to both the city and the bargaining unit, then that's certainly an option. It just creates a lot more work. So we're just going to really work towards putting our bargaining units in a room and work on some things a little earlier than usual. But a lot of those potential raises, if that's where council ends up going, are not figured in the 2022 budget. So that's something that will need to be addressed. And, as always, thank you. I don't think this is going to be my last one of these. I want to make sure Jonna gets on and onboards properly and turn over the pieces to her to run this. But I bet you see me one more time, and then maybe hearing a different voice behind this might be more exciting. But I do love doing these reports, and I do love talking to you about what's going on in the city and our finances, and making sure that we continue to meet the needs of our community. So was there any questions on this slide or in general before I turn it back over to the mayor for the regular agenda?
And once we get off the screen share, we might be able to see all the council members.
It walked away. Stop share.
There it is. Okay.
All right.
I see Nathan's got a hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, I just have to say, you've been navigating us through some very difficult times, and I just want to say thank you, and especially to all of our department heads out there, all of our departments, employees. This has been so challenging, but most of all for all of you. So thank you so much for your leadership in your respective areas. So thank you.
Thank you. One of the things I like to tell staff as I find myself trying to be the cheerleader through some very, interesting and tough times is, hey, keep hanging in there. We're doing actually pretty good for our first pandemic. So I say that to the community too. Keep hanging in there.
Again, thank you for the clarity. I really appreciate the way the presentations have gone from finance. And I know that one of the comments we made to John, make sure we continue that same kind of clarity before the mayor and before the council. Certainly appreciate it. And Nathan, thanks again for those comments. Our department heads, our employees have just done a fantastic job. And we still have obviously some more challenges along the way because we're still not there yet. But there's more hope than there has been. So that's very encouraging. We now move to item number E on our agenda. This is the consent agenda. These items are considered routine in nature. And do I have a motion to read by title only?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, Laura McAloon, our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Your consent agenda consists of a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the special workshop meeting of March 6, 2021, and approve them as submitted. A motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the regular meeting of March 9, 2021, and approve them as submitted. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 102550 through 102598, totaling $119,263.04. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 102599 through 102616. Electronic transfers 5, 6, 688, 693 through 697, and payroll direct deposits numbered 67504 through 67578, totaling $1,184,251.46. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 102617 through 102682, totaling $422,543.50. A motion to approve the purchase of virtual storage hardware and RAM to improve performance and refresh the city's virtual server infrastructure. And resolution number R-15-21, a resolution adopting a revised Pullman Transit Dial-A-Ride Handbook for distribution to current and new riders, rescinding resolution number R-17-18, and other matters related thereto.
Is there any item the council would like out for discussion? Nathan?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Number one.
Number one. Any others? The consent agenda then consists of items 2 through 7. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So move.
Do I hear a second? Second, I see a hand from Pat Wright. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? With that, Nathan?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had sent an email to the mayor and Mike regarding an additional goal, and I hope the council finds it agreeable to add. I feel like for many, many years, we've discussed how, or there's been a discussion how many of our students are not necessarily registered to vote here in the city. It's been a challenge. And I'd like to see, just like with many of the other goals that we have here, a way for us to possibly partner with, for instance, the League of Women Voters, the Pullman School District, WSU, to see if we can find a way to start a program of registering students and new voters here in the city. I know this is a huge goal for the League of Women Voters here in Pullman and nationally. So I would just like to add that to our list of goals.
Any comments from Laura? I'll go to our city attorney first. Laura?
Yeah, Councilmember Weller, can I just clarify whether it was a goal that was discussed? Because this item is approval of the minutes of the meeting.
Yeah, no, it was not previously.
Okay. So you can certainly have the discussion about whether to add that when goals are adopted, but these are the minutes of this workshop meeting. So I don't think it's appropriate to add them to the minutes if they weren't brought up at that meeting.
All right. Well, I will listen to the legal whiz. Absolutely. I'll wait. Thank you, Laura.
Okay.
So
Okay.
with that, would you make a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes, sir. I motion to move to approve number 1 on the consent agenda.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And so when we do go through the goals and prioritize them, that'll be the time to bring that up. Okay. With that, we now move to the regular agenda. Our first item is a resolution authorizing the execution of an engineering services agreement between the city and Gray and Osborne for a decant facility project. With that, we go to Clayton Forsman, our Deputy Public Works Director. Clayton.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson, and good evening, Council. The city recently executed a Washington State Department of Ecology grant through the Stormwater Financial Assistance Program to construct a new decant facility on city property located near 900 Northwest Guy Street. This is across from our M&O yard. The facility is needed to properly manage the liquid and solid waste generated from the M&O division during their road and storm drain cleaning activities, primarily Vector truck and street sweeping waste, as well as from sanitary sewer maintenance and operation activities. The city envisions the new decant facility to consist of 2 or 3 covered impervious bays with liquid waste from the decanting process to be collected and routed through an oil water separator or some other type of treatment device before being discharged to the city's sanitary sewer system. The project schedule is to complete the design so that we can bid the project next January, with construction to follow next summer. To select a consultant for the work, staff solicited statements of qualifications from qualified firms. Gray and Osborne Incorporated was selected by a committee of Public Works staff. The full scope of work is included in your packet, and the work will be performed on a cost reimbursable, not to exceed amount of $111,000 and $111,550. Funding for the project is from the stormwater budget, and the project is included in the CIP. It is staff's recommendation that council adopt the attached resolution approving an engineering services agreement with Gray and Osborne Incorporated. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Any questions on this decant facility? Okay. See no questions. Do I hear a motion on this resolution?
Move to adopt resolution number R-16-21.
I have my hand up. I have a question, sorry.
Okay, Al, let's get the second done, and then we'll have the discussion. Okay, I saw a second. Okay, so Al, you want for the discussion?
Okay. Clayton, no problem with these guys not being an Eastern Washington company, being over in Seattle, and them being able to handle the consulting part of this.
Yeah, great question, Al. So we had 4 firms that sent in proposals. And actually, the reason we selected Gray and Osborne was they've completed 8 decant facility designs in the last 9 years. And it's kind of, when we compare them to the other consultants, they just had a lot of experience. And so I feel like they're really going to knock this one out of the park for us.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Okay, any other discussion? Laura, would you read the resolution, please?
Resolution number R-16-21, a resolution authorizing the execution of an engineering services agreement between the City of Pullman and Gray and Osborne Incorporated for the decant facility project.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We now move to another resolution, item number 2 on our agenda. It's a resolution authorizing the execution of an engineering services agreement between the city and RH2 Engineering for the purpose of designing the Tank 12 project. With that, here's our Public Works Director, Kevin Gardis.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. The city's current water system plan calls for additional storage to be constructed in the northeast high pressure zone. This zone serves the upper portions of the industrial park and a good portion of apartment land. It will ultimately serve the area around the airport as well, with a future tank at the same overflow elevation. There is currently 1 existing tank within this pressure zone. The existing tank is too small and a little short. There are some existing upper elevation areas of this pressure zone that have marginal pressure, so raising the overflow elevation on the new tank will help take care of that. The ultimate disposition of the existing tank, whether to demo it or retain it, will be determined with our consultant during the design process. There are probably some good reasons to retain it and also some good reasons to let it go, but we'll figure that out during design. In October of 2019, Council authorized a memorandum of understanding with Retreat at Pullman developers to purchase a parcel for this new tank adjacent to the existing tank. That property purchase has been completed. The parcel is the future site of Tank 12. To select a consultant for the Tank 12 project, staff solicited proposals from qualified firms. 8 proposals were received, which were shortlisted to 3 firms for virtual interviews. The firm selected through this process was RH2 Engineering, Inc. Coincidentally, they're also working on our water system plan update right now. A full scope and budget has been negotiated. A copy of the full scope is included in your packet. The project is to perform on a cost reimbursable basis with a not to exceed budget of $420,647. Funding for this project is from the Utility Capital Projects budget of the Utility Fund, and this project is included in the city CIP. A design will take place this year with construction slated for 2022, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Kevin on this? Seeing none, then do I hear a motion on this resolution?
Move to adopt resolution R-17-21.
Second.
Moving second. Laura, would you read the resolution, please?
Resolution number R-17-21, a resolution authorizing the execution of an engineering services agreement between the City of Pullman and RH2 Engineering Incorporated for the purpose of designing the Tank 12 project and providing support services during bidding and construction.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. With that, we now go to item number 3 on our agenda. It's a resolution approving a preliminary plat of Canyon Crest Planned Residential Development, PRD. And we will first start with the appearance of fairness questions. And I'll call each one of you that I can see on my screen. And I want you to know ahead of time, I did ask our city attorney whether I could do one appearance of fairness for both resolutions. And I was told, no, you will do appearance of fairness questions for each individual resolution. So I just want to make sure you understand that. So first of all, does any member of this council have any knowledge of having conducted business with either the proponents or opponents of the proceeding? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann,
No.
Nathan,
No.
Glenn, no. Has any member of this council communicated with any proponent or opponent regarding the proposal that is subject of this proceeding? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Me, no. Does any member of this council have either a financial or personal interest in the outcome of this proceeding? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Glenn, no. Does any member of this council know whether or not their employer has a financial interest in this matter or has an interest in the outcome of this proceeding? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Glenn, no. Does any member of this council live or own property within 300 feet of the area which is subject of this proceeding? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Glenn, no. Does any member of this council have any special knowledge about the substance or merits of this proceeding, which would or could cause the council member to prejudge the outcome of the proceeding? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Glenn, no. Is there any member of this council who believes that he or she cannot sit and hear the matter fairly and impartially, both as to the respective positions of the proponents and opponents in this proceeding? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
And we have not heard from anyone on the phone or in any kind of email, but is there any member of the audience who, because of the appearance of fairness doctrine, wishes to disqualify any member of this council from hearing this matter? If so, please state the name of the council member and the reason or reasons why you believe that member should be disqualified because of the appearance of fairness doctrine. And with that, we now go to our planning director, RJ Lott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. So as the Mayor alluded to just a moment ago, there are two items on your agenda tonight. One is for the preliminary plat, which is first on your agenda. The second one is the preliminary plan of the planned residential development. The reason that there are two items on the agenda is because each requires its own resolution. So you would have seen the staff report for both are similar and they are somewhat interchangeable. And the reason for that is that the municipal code requires both to run simultaneously. So with that, let me do a quick summary on the project for you. The preliminary plat is the division of approximately 10.3 acres located on the west end of Greyhound Way. As you can see here, as it's outlined in gray. The preliminary plan would allow for 68 single-family homes within the 75 lots. The extra 7 lots would be used for items such as parking, open spaces, and other items similar to that. The plan is also, thank you, Kevin, for getting the lights. The plan is also subject to 3 phases. And let me put that up here shortly. There we go. The plan is phased, with the first phase connecting Greyhound Way with Terraview, and that would increase the connectivity with both vehicular and pedestrian traffic in the area, especially with Kamiak Elementary located to the north. The zoning for the area is R2, which is low-density multifamily residential. The PRD plan did go through a site plan review, and 32 conditions were set on the PRD, which is included in your materials for this evening's agenda. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing at their February regularly scheduled meeting. There was a few members of the public in opposition and had voiced some concerns on items such as traffic, view sheds, drainage, and other similar items. The engineer for the applicant, or I should say the owner, did address those concerns, and ultimately the Planning Commission did put forth a unanimous recommendation. Is there any questions I can answer at this time?
Any questions? Seeing none. Do I hear a motion to approve this resolution?
Motion to approve resolution number R-18-21.
Do I hear a second? Second from Eileen. Almost felt like an auctioneer for a second. Okay. Laura, would you read the resolution, please?
Resolution number R-18-21, a resolution approving the preliminary plat of Canyon Crest planned residential development.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. We now move to item number 4, which is a resolution approving the Canyon Crest planned residential development PRD preliminary plan. And as I mentioned earlier, the appearance of fairness doctrine. All right. Does any member of this council have knowledge of having conducted business with either the proponent or opponents of this proceedings? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Glenn, no. Has any member of this council communicated with any proponent or opponent regarding this proposal that is subject to this proceeding? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Glenn, no. Does any member of this council have either a financial or personal interest in the outcome of this proceedings? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Does any member of this council know whether or not their employer has a financial interest in the matter or has an interest in the outcome of this proceeding? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Glenn, no. Does any member of this council live or own property within 300 feet of the area which is subject to this proceedings? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Glenn, no. Does any member of this council have any special knowledge about the substance or merits of this proceedings, which would or could cause the council member to prejudge the outcome of this proceedings? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Glenn, no. Is there any member of this council who believes that he or she cannot sit and hear this matter fairly and impartially, both as to the respective positions of the proponents and opponents of the proceedings? Dan?
No.
Eileen?
No.
Pat?
No.
Al?
No.
Ann?
No.
Nathan?
No.
Glenn, no. As I mentioned earlier, we have not heard anything from the public, but is there any member of the audience who, because of the appearance of fairness doctrine, wishes to disqualify any member of this council from hearing this matter? If so, please state the name of the council member and the reason or reasons why you believe that member should be disqualified because of the appearance of fairness question. Once again, R.J. Lott.
Thank you, Mayor. Very similar staff report. Slightly different items to cover on this one for the preliminary plan. If approved tonight by the council, The applicant would have 3 years to bring forth a final plan. And they did have the phasing, which I showed earlier with the first phase connecting Terraview with Greyhound Way. At that time, the construction would have to be in place for the road and for the sidewalks within 1 year after the final plan. Were there any, and of course the Planning Commission did have a unanimous recommendation of approval for this item as well. Is there any questions of the council at this time?
Seeing no questions, then do I hear a motion on this resolution?
Move to adopt.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Laura, would you read the resolution, please?
Resolution number R-19-21, a resolution approving the Canyon Crest Planned Residential Development PRD preliminary plan.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, RJ. We now move to a public hearing to consider the 2021-2026 Transit Development Plan and 2020 Annual Report for Pullman Transit. Wayne Thompson is on.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This year's annual report is slightly different than previous years for two reasons. First of all, I'm coming to you much earlier in the year, which I prefer to come to you in the spring and talk about the recently past year rather than the fall as I have in the past. And secondly, we're going to summarize what ended up being a rather unusual year, 2020. So I'll first review that year, and then we'll talk about the 6-year transit development plan. The entire process is good information for you to have, and I always find it helpful for me to review and compile. But it's done annually, and it's in this format as a requirement of the State Department of Transportation, or WISDOT. Many of the formalities that we go through are because we're grant recipients, and this I find one of the more useful. So 2020 started off as a fairly typical year. We were in the midst of the 2019-2020 service year. We had 17 buses and 4 vans on the road. Dial-A-Ride was on pace to exceed 20,000 rides for the 6th year in a row. Fixed route service was on pace for 1.3 to 1.4 million rides. Utility tax revenue was the highest it had ever been to start a year, and we were fully staffed except for 1 bus washing position. Then in mid-March, as spring break approached, we began our preparations and our response to the COVID-19 situation. Service ran as normal in the days leading up to spring break. And as expected, we dropped from about 7,000 daily rides to under 1,000. But unlike previous years, the ridership did not recover. After spring break, the local school district, Pullman School District, canceled their classes on March 16th. WSU went to an online learning format on the 23rd after spring break. And we immediately shifted our focus to providing a base level of service somewhere between summer service and full service. And here are a few of the main response points that I've noted. April 1st, we reduced service from midnight to 10 p.m. We also dropped 2-3 from 6 express buses, and we temporarily canceled the popular coffee route. We stocked up on hand sanitizer, Clorox wipes, and gloves like you would not believe. And our drivers gained a new respect for their bus washing counterparts because we shifted our emphasis to cleaning duties. And many driving assignments also had a bus washing component. We met buses and still do at the transfer station for cleaning. The Dial-A-Ride vans are cleaned twice daily. On the Dial-A-Ride vans, only 1 patron is allowed unless they are from the same household, and no one sits in the front seat by the driver. On the buses, we limited capacity to 10 in July, and ridership had actually decreased enough that's not been a problem. But we do have a trailing bus system, tripper service as needed to fix that if it becomes a problem. And we stopped collecting fares in March to minimize interaction between the driver and patrons. And we encourage rear door boarding and departing. And finally, we required masks early on, and that's a move that has also been recently supported federally just this February. Locally, we did 2 different forms of delivery service to assist the community. We provided media delivery for the Neal Public Library, and we continue to provide senior meals for the senior center. In addition to the lost fares at the door, we also saw our utility tax income start to go down in March. And with no live classes for the school district or WSU or Spokane Falls Community College, those contracts were either reduced or canceled. And I will say that we continued to rely heavily on the WSU contract, which was reduced but never canceled. Even with the distance learning model, the employees still continued to use our service to get to campus, and a lot of students remained in town, and that's evidence of that is 6 of our top 10 stops over the past year are on campus, and the other 4 are popular destination points for students off campus. Overall, we saw our contract revenue decrease in 2020 by $600,000. But grant revenue, especially the FTA CARES Act, left us at the end of the year still $500,000 ahead. 2019 happened to be a year we bought a bus, so that was excessive for that year. But the FTA CARES Act funding was quite helpful. Utility tax did start to go down in the spring, but recovered by the end of the year to the point we were slightly ahead of 2019, so not as bad as we thought we might be. The CARES Act funding, and ours specifically, was FTA CARES Act, to be separate from what was received for general fund purposes. That was very helpful in purchasing the personal protective equipment, the PPE, the gloves, the masks, the hand sanitizer, but also in supplementing lost revenues so we could continue to perform services and not dip too heavily into our reserves. As you would expect, ridership decreased heavily. Fixed routes were down 64%, dial-a-ride only 51%. We also did not provide our typical park and ride service that we always look forward to for the home WSU football games, and we also did not provide the Independence Day celebration in July service. Still, beyond the COVID-19 response, there were many elements of business as usual that needed to be attended to. We had received funding in 2019 to assist with the purchase of 2 electric buses, and there had been an ongoing protest at the Washington state level, so we had no heavy-duty bus contract to purchase from. So with Laura's assistance, we had the unique opportunity to purchase through the Virginia state contract for heavy-duty buses. That went quite well. Those buses will arrive in just over a month, this May. And we also had the opportunity in 2020 to apply for a 3rd electric bus. And March is typically when we hear, so I'm anxious to hear the result of that application. We had received in 2019 our last electric hybrid bus, and we unveiled that to the public last summer of 2020. And that is the bus you'll see in town with the water conservation theme. We received a new dial-a-ride van in 2020. That was a second of the new Ford Transit ADA accessible vans. And we went through the RFP process to award a contract for new video systems in all of our revenue vehicles and our facilities. And that contract is complete. We received a grant. It's called the Green Capital Transportation Grant, all state funding, to upgrade the electrical infrastructure here at Transit that would allow us to put in 2 electric bus charging stations. And that was awarded and also complete. We have 2 charging stations, no buses yet, but we're ready for the buses. And finally, on the business, as usual, we as a result of the virus, we did not hold our annual safety banquet. It would have been our 6th annual safety banquet, but we did still have 18 drivers we awarded safe driving awards to at the end of the year. Now I'll talk about looking ahead to the next 6 years. And our first task at hand is to recover to at least 2019 levels of funding and service. And then I look at slow growth, definitely stable but consistent growth. Service, 1% at least. Revenue and expenditures, about 2%. And utility tax, I don't want to expect too much, so I'm only expecting in the figures you see 1% growth there. Operationally, we'll continue to promote and rely on those contracts with the educational institutions here in Pullman, WSU, the Pullman School District, and the local branch of the Spokane Falls Community College. We will continue to gather and use and share the information from surveys and use those in service planning. We will look seriously, continue to, at the local and regional connections, which will include the airport and Moscow-Pullman connections. And we'll use the technological resources that we have to evaluate our service levels, focusing perhaps on peak time service and even the size of vehicles that we use. These were items that were discussed in last year's public hearing, and I included them in the report. And although 2020 may not have addressed those points to the fullest, we have not forgotten. In the capital forecast, we continue to plan for one vehicle a year, a van 1 year, a bus another year. That is our CIP strategy, and buses especially. We have an aging fleet. We often get responses from our national database preparations that we must have made a mistake. We can't have 1994 buses on the road. Well, we do. They're well maintained and they're in good shape. But we would like to replace those with newer buses. We'd like to continue looking at the electric bus concept, and if not, then at least a biodiesel, some clean fuel alternatives. And the benefits that we've identified are definitely noise and the air pollution concerns in the neighborhoods. We want to continue to look for incorporating smaller vehicles, if feasible, into our service on campus. That would be extremely difficult with the need of students to get to peak times of classes. But there are options, and just recently I've looked at the state's van pool service, and that's not turned out to be a good fit for us. It's not a commuter need that we have. And finally, on capital, we are looking very soon to apply for funding for a facility expansion, and that would be to get all of our revenue vehicles under shelter each night. Right now, I would say 2/3 are under shelter, the rest are outside. And also, we need to expand, bring up to date our employee break room and add some office space. And we definitely want to continue to provide that safe, reliable, and customer-friendly service to meet the local needs of transit in the community. So I would be more than happy to incorporate any feedback tonight into the report, and I plan to come back to council on April 13th with a resolution asking for that report to be adopted. Thank you.
Comments from the council? And this was set for a public hearing, and I noticed in your report, Wayne, that you did notify for 2 weeks that we were going to do this tonight, and we have heard nothing back. So I am going to still say at this time we open the public hearing, and since we heard no feedback ahead of time, I will now close the public hearing for this particular matter. And you heard also that he's coming back with a resolution on the other part. So with that, any further comments? Wayne, I just want to say on behalf of the council and behalf of the citizens and the residents of this community, Pullman Transit has done an amazing job during this COVID-19. And keeping our drivers safe is one of the biggest challenges I know, and you've done a great job. And the plexiglass is up. We've got the masks. You've done a good job there. And I know we've had some challenges, but I just want to thank you for having some semblance of normalcy with a Pullman Transit bus making the rounds, and we can see people in it. And I know it's not full with a 6 feet distance, and I know you're sticking with that, but we might be able to get to 3 eventually once we get some more guidelines from CDC. But I just want to say that you're just doing a fantastic job. People are using it. We've seen the dial-a-rides out there. I see people near the Community Action Center for the food bank. We see people in the community that are using it, that have to use it, and that need it. That's their only transportation. And we really appreciate the work that the drivers and yourself have done for Pullman Transit. So thanks.
Well, thank you. We do our best, and we have a great team here. Thank you.
With that, we now go to any new business. We have not heard of any new business tonight, and we have not had anyone on the list. So at this point, I'm going to adjourn a meeting of the council, and we're going to go to executive session. And the executive session is to discuss with legal counsel representing the city matters relating to agency enforcement action, or to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency potential litigation concerning litigation that has been specifically threatened to which the agency, governing body, or member acting in the official capacity is or is likely to become a party, and litigation that the agency reasonably believes may be commenced by or against the agency, the government body, or member acting in the official capacity. And the executive session is expected to last 15 minutes. If it becomes necessary to extend the executive session, someone will return to announce the anticipated additional time needed by the council. The council does not anticipate taking any action following the executive session. So I have 8:50 right now. We're going to have to go to the breakout room, and then we will reconvene in executive session. You can see on your screen, you have your invitation to join the breakout room.
All right. The City Council will extend their executive session for an additional 5 minutes. It is now 9:07. The City Council will extend their executive session for another additional 5 minutes. The city council has extended their executive session for an additional 3 minutes.
Okay, we are back now in the regular session. It's 9:19. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Nathan and a second from Dan. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we are adjourned at 9:19.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night,
Thank
all.
you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.